Hi, what's all the racket about? I'm sorry, I had to start that way. I just been trying to think of a good opening line. This is a tennis racket that I used when I was probably the worst tennis player ever in the history of the world. So I had to figure out how to make good use of my racket, and I did. So for years, this tennis racket, which is, I'll say, lived a very long time, probably way longer than it would have if I actually played tennis, was part of my programs. And then, life changes and was so tall. And I had to go somewhere where I had a bag only this big. So I readjusted my racket. I'm in a different racket now. And I made a shorter but wiser king. So that's who I'm using for my story today. And that's very appropriate because it is a fabulous story about the power of the small. I can say that with some great deal of knowledge because, although you can't tell, I am not the tallest person. I am the tallest person in the room, but then I'm alone in my room. So I want to get this message across to all of us, especially, well, I was going to say especially now, but that doesn't work either. So I'm just going to say especially ever because everyone can make a difference. And that's what our story is about today. So I've used a few sports types equipment. I have a cap. I have my one of my favorite caps. It's not a baseball cap, although it was originally designed as a baseball cap. The peak goes out. Why is that, you say? Or maybe you didn't say. I did. Why is it? Because it's supposed to shield your eyes from the sun. And if you're a ball player, that's really important because if the ball is coming towards you, you need to see it. And if the sun is in your eyes, and we do love the sun, my son's over there for today, not my SUN son. So I can't illustrate that for you. A lot of people like to put the peak in the back because it's kind of cool, but it does shield the back of your neck. I've even seen baseball caps that have a peak in the front and a peak in the back. But our cap for today will be worn rakishly on the top of my head. Oops, with the peak in the front. That would be the front. Note already. The shadow crosses my eyes. But I can see you. So, good. All right. So, what else equipment is? As I said before, I got a new racket. Actually, someone played tennis with my racket because I got it at this really cool store called Play It Again Sport, which I highly recommend if you want something. I'm trying to get my head on straight here. Maybe it's my head. You think? Yeah, I think it's my head's crooked, not my head. So let's go with our story. We have a ball, we have a racket, we have a magnificent story that I'm going to tell you. And here is what I'd like you to do with this story. I'd like you to tell it to somebody else and think about its message. And in case you don't remember, this is Marilyn Price, and I am with the Mentor Project, an incredible organization that you can find on Facebook and on YouTube, and of course on the Ever Magical website. So here we go. You have a part in this story. Listen carefully for it. Once upon a time, there was a little boy. His name was David. That's me. Now, David was a shepherd boy, and David would sit in the field with his sheep and tell them stories. He was a really good storyteller, and the sheep were excellent at being sheep. Every once in a while, when they were busy listening and wanted to nod approval at David, they would say, I heard you say ba all the way here. And the sheep would sit contentedly at David's feet as he told them a story. Once upon a time. It was a good story. Now, David did a bunch of other things for his sheep too. He made sure that they were safe. If they moved too far to the right, as sheep might do, he moved them over. If they moved too far to the left, other way. David was excellent at his job, and he listened carefully for the needs of his sheep. So he fed them, made sure they could find food, and then he made sure they were safe. He told them stories. He would even sing to them. And so it went. Now, one day, David, the shepherd boy, went to help his brothers. In those days, what happened was if there was trouble, the, some of the men would go and defend. And that's what his brothers were doing. They were defending their people. And David, the shepherd boy, brought them some food. He went all the way into where the battle was in the middle of raging. And David, brave David, looked up and saw a giant. Oh, the giant was threatening all of David's friends and people. And David took a tiny stone. And the story goes that David shot in the middle of his forehead that giant, who fell to the ground with a thundering thump. And David, with a tiny little stone, became an instant hero. But David was not much at being a hero then. So what did he do? He went back to his sheep who were waiting in the field. Again, he had to make sure they were safe. So he moved some of them back from the right and some of them back from the left. And they, of course, said, bah, in response. And so our story goes, for just a little while. But now, things began to get more interesting. Young David the shepherd, who had saved his brothers and his people from a giant, the word went out into the kingdom. And who should come from the court? The king. Oh, the king had heard about David and wanted to make his acquaintance. David, sitting in the midst of the sheep, looked up, and when he saw the king, he said, "Oh my, your majesty." It was, of course, King Saul. King Saul was the very first king of Israel, and oh, he was sometimes confused and sometimes brave and sometimes didn't know what to do. He was the first. But what he did know was that he needed help, and that's always a good thing to know. So when he heard about David, he went and asked for his help. What can I do for your majesty? I need help. With what? From who? Me? Yes, I have heard of your bravery, and I am wondering if you will come to my court and help me. Well, of course, your majesty. With what? Well, number one, I need your music, and I need your words, and I need your help in my battles. Ooh. Well, what do you think David did? You'd be right. David went with the king, and together they were quite a pair, David and the king. And the people loved David. They loved his bravery. They loved his music and his songs. They loved him so much that they wanted David to be the king. That did not go over too well. So, what did they do? They asked for David to be the king. Do you think King Saul liked that? Nope, not at all. And so, what would you do? I don't actually know, but I do know what Saul did. He kicked David out of the kingdom, and then he chased him. King and his armies chased David for 3 days and 3 nights. David was tired. David was exhausted. David needed a place to hide, to refresh, and that's exactly what he did. For a moment, he escaped from the king, and he found a cave, and he ducked inside. With a huge, deep breath, David found some solace in that cave. I'd say it lasted for about 5 minutes. And what do you know? An itsy bitsy spider came climbing up David's body and landed on David's nose. Oh, have you ever had a spider land on your nose? Well, this is what I think you might find. It itches, so you would scratch. And when you scratch your nose, even in the middle of your sleep, it will wake you up. David woke up, and when he saw that spider that had awoken him after he needed such sleep, he said, "What are you doing here?" And David was answered with this: "I'm here to help you. Look at you. You're tiny. How could you help me? You're too little." and he blew the spider off. What? And of course, so tired, he went back to sleep again. Mhm. That lasted about 6 minutes. And in that time, the spider, who had been blown off, came, climbed up David's body, landed on his chin. Now, it itches just as much if a spider lands on your chin as if a spider landed on your nose. And so he did what? He scratched. He woke himself up. He looked down at the spider and said, "What are you doing here?" I came back. "I know. And you woke me up. I need to rest. I'm tired. The king is chasing me. Go away." "But I told you I'm here to help." "And I told you you are too little." The spider got so angry at David. She stood up on all eights. She said, "No one is too small to help someone else. I am here to help you." David laughed. He said, "I told you, go away." Now, in David's defense, he was tired. My guess is he was also hungry. So the spider went away. David fell asleep. Again. This time, I'm here to report that the spider did not come back and land on his cheek, under here, really ticklish part, or even behind his ear. This time, the spider built a web over the entrance to that cave, so fast, so furious, within 1 minute's time, she had completely covered the entrance to that cave. And David slept in peace, which was good, because at that particular moment, when he was deep in his sleep, who should come by but His Royal Majesty the King, trumpets blaring, doo 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 doo. But when he came by the cave that David was hiding in, he kept on going. You see, the king, in his wisdom, thought that no spider could build a web that fast. And so he kept on going back to the court, and David slept in peace. The story goes, as I am told, that David slept through the night, and when he woke up, when he looked out the entrance to that cave, when he saw what that spider had done, David knew exactly what had happened. He knew that no matter how big you are, you can always help someone. That itty bitty spider saved David's life. David, of course, as some of you may know, or some of you may not, became the next king of Israel. David Melech Yisrael, we often call him David the king. He lived quite happily ever after because some spider, an itty bitty spider, did what David didn't think she could do. But you know, and I know, that it doesn't matter how big you are, you can always do something important and help someone else, or even yourself, because you are important as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is an old story that I hope you tell everyone and live to tell every time you think you are too small to do some good. Speaking of that, I hope you have a good week, a week of remarkable good. I look forward to seeing you again. I look forward to knowing that you watched this program again and shared it with others. I thank you from the Mentor Project. I thank you from myself, Marilyn Price. You are a person who can do good. Amen to that. And that's the end. And this means that you should have a ball today. Take good care.